Welcome to the Lytes Out podcast. This is Chris Lytes Out Lyddell, and this is our journey to document the history of mixed martial arts. I have brought with me my friend, the MMA detective Mike Davis, and together we will preserve the history and hear some great stories from the world in the era of the no-holds-barred. Thank you and enjoy.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Lytes Out podcast. We have got a special treat. We've got a man that has raised multiple world champions from their first fight all the way to their title fight. Owner of The Pit, John Hackleman. John, thank you so much for joining us.
Hey, thanks for having me. Everything's fantastic.
Why don't we start with your beginnings? So originally you came on the scene as somebody with a background in Hawaiian Kenpo. Would you mind kind of bringing us through that period as to where you're at right now in regards to training?
When you say the beginning, are you talking about my Hawaiian Kenpo beginnings, or?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. So I started training at 10, and anybody that's been to Honolulu, Hawaii, especially in the 70s, they know why I had to start training. It's a rough place, and it's you don't really like the blonde hair guys, growing up there. So I started training really young in a system called Kaju Kenpo, which is karate, judo, jiu-jitsu, Kenpo, and boxing. And that's a mixture. It's a system that was started in Hawaii in 1947 by some local guys. And it's a pretty well-known system. There's millions of people training in Kaju Kenpo right now. So I started training young. And then after I got out of the Army and moved to California, I continued my training. But I just didn't like some of the things in Kaju Kenpo. I didn't think they fit my way of life. A lot of the traditional forms and stuff, and I was more just into fighting stuff. So, while I was training it, and I love Kaju Kenpo, and I still do. It's my roots, but I just didn't feel like I was being true to Kaju Kenpo because I wasn't sticking with their curriculum. So I renamed it, and it took me a little while to think of a name. But I came up with Hawaiian Kenpo because Kenpo means law of the fist. Basically, it just means fighting style, Kenpo. And then I'm from Hawaii, so I called it Hawaiian. So Hawaiian Kenpo, boom. So I started that in 1985. I had a little backyard gym in Woodland Hills, California. And I started, I was working full-time as a registered nurse, the night shift. And I would train during the day, and then next thing I know, I had people coming over. Hey, you got a gym at your place? Next thing I know, doctors from the hospital. And I was working part-time as a bouncer. And a lot of those bouncers wanted to come train. So next thing I know, there's I have pretty much a full-on gym in my backyard with guys getting the pit tattoo and stuff. And it was just a part-time thing. It's in my backyard, But then for some reason, when people come in and want to spar, a lot of wannabe tough guys would come in and stuff and say, hey, I want to spar. What are the rules? And my thing was, there are no rules. The golden rule is hit as hard as you want to be hit. But other than that, there's no rules. There's just absolutely no rules, because I want this to be as real to a street fight as I can make it without being in a street fight. So it was rough. It was rough at first. I kind of overdid that, trying to be the tough gym, and I kind of overdid the way we did the sparring. But it was known as a really tough gym, the Pit, And 1990, I moved out of LA into up north, central coast of California, and I first thing I did was I built a gym in my backyard. This time I have a bigger backyard. I have 3 acres, so the gym was bigger. My first gym was 400 square feet. The second one was 1,000 square feet in my backyard. And I started training people in my backyard again. And, I'm still working full-time as a registered nurse. And next thing you know, I have all these guys that want to start fighting, including a guy named Chuck Liddell. And so that backyard gym where I have cops, nurses, doctors, lawyers, teachers, all training. Now I got a guy that says, I want to fight. So I was like, oh, shit, okay. So next thing you know, we're on a private plane to Japan, and I got Chuck Liddell winning a world title, and things just went from there. That's the beginnings.
Well, let's also talk about your beginning as well. I had heard that Don King signed you to a developmental contract as a boxer.
That's half true. That's half true.
Okay.
I was a boxer. I did everything when I was coming up. I was doing, Kaji Kempo, and I hurt my hamstring. So my instructor sent me to a boxing gym so I could sing and not do any kicks until my hamstring healed. And then after that, I just started, when my hamstring healed, I went back to my martial arts gym. I stayed with the boxing, and that was kind of part of my, upbringing. I mean, I was a boxer. Like, some guys played football in high school, they played wrestling in high school, whatever. I was a boxer from 14 on. So I was like fighting for the Golden Gloves every year, so I was doing that. And then when I got out of the Army, I turned pro, and I started a pretty, big gym, Muhammad Ali's boxing gym. And I was wanting to box, but by then I was kind of already into kickboxing, and I liked that better. But I did fight for Don King in a fight. But I wasn't signed to any multi-fight contract. But I did fight in one of his, I think 2 of his shows, maybe one. I fought maybe one or maybe 2 of Don King's shows, but I was like on the undercard, and I didn't go that far in boxing. I switched it over to kickboxing real quick because I just realized that was more of my forte. So, but I did have a fight for Don King. So I could pretend, like say, well, I fought for Don King. I was one of Don King's guys, But in reality, I was on one of his undercards once or twice. But anyway,
you filled his undercard, sold some tickets. Yeah, 100%. All right. So before Zuffa's purchase,
so I did box. Yeah. What?
Before Zuffa's purchase of the UFC, I was told that Dana White managed Chuck Liddell. Is that true?
That's kind of half true. Before Dana was, I don't think the word was managing. He was kind of helping him out. It was Chuck and Tito, and Dana was in Vegas, and he already had the connection and with the Zuffa, with the Fertitas, and I think Dana, and there was nothing to manage. You know what I mean? So Chuck, when Dana took over, when they took over the Fertitas, then Dana did pretty much the managing. He pretty much manages the fighters. This isn't, MMA, UFC isn't like when you're boxing and there's one promoter and you have a manager and you go to sometimes you fight for this guy, sometimes you fight for that guy, different promoters. It all depends on what kind of deal your manager gets you. But once you're in the UFC, Dana's your manager pretty much. And you could have another guy that says he's your manager, and he maybe gets you sponsorships and gets 20% of that, or he might help you out with your medicals or something. There's a guy helping you out, but a manager in MMA, UFC, is a lot different than a manager if you're a boxer. It's a lot different. So, I think Dana was friends with Chuck and Tito back in the early days, but I don't really know if manager is the right word. But
okay, so let's really clarify this, because this is something that's very interesting to me. So you got Dana White with no background, like he's got a little bit of background in boxing. Obviously, he's got connections to Zuffa, knows combat sports. Nobody can deny that. But at this point, Chuck, yourself, you guys, you're pretty much hanging out at like the Cobra Fighting Federation, maybe Hitman Fight Promotions. How does Dana have credibility in the eyes of Tito and Chuck, really before they even made an appearance in the UFC?
I think that question's kind of, what it reminds me of, and as it's kind of the same answer. Like, how did tap out guys get so much credibility? I mean, some guys wearing masks and costumes, and next thing you know, they're sponsoring the best fighters in the world. They have all kind of, cred, and they're out, credibility. I'm doing like cred, and they get to, do whatever they want. And I think the two are very similar. I mean, it was in its infancy, right? MMA. There wasn't really, the Zuffa hasn't been the UFC's, owners yet, but they were there. They were right there. So Dana was right there, kind of like the tap out guys. He was right there, hanging with Chuck, hanging with Tito. He kind of knew that they were going to be buying the UFC soon. He was, befriending them and helping them. I mean, Dana was a big advocate of Chuck and some of the other guys, but let's just go with Chuck. He was a huge part of Chuck's beginnings and Chuck's advancement into other areas in MMA, and then eventually into the UFC, obviously, and then took over. But even in the beginnings, Dana had a hand in things, and he kind of maybe he knew what was going to happen. He already knew they were buying it, and he knew that already. I wasn't privy to that information, but I know that Dana was a big part, if not a huge part, a substantial part of Chuck's progression in MMA. Huge part. I think Dana has been there since the beginning. Obviously, not in the very beginning like I was, like 1990 when he was still at Cal Poly, but he was in the beginning when Chuck was switching over from kickboxing to MMA. Dana was always there, and he was always a part of Chuck's progression. More than I was, definitely. I was the teaching guy, but Dana was, the managerial type, the guy that kind of pushed him along and got him out there. I'm just the gym guy, teaching the techniques and getting the sparring and working the diet and getting the conditioning and stuff like that. But guys like Dana, they were the guys that were doing all the, pen and paper stuff.
Okay. In 1990, Chuck Liddell shows up at your gym. You had talked about meeting him.
Yeah.
What is day one like with Chuck?
Day one is a mutual guy, not a mutual acquaintance, and it was Chuck's sensei at the time, set up a fight between me and Chuck. So, that was our first meeting. When we were done our fight, Chuck asked me if I would train him after that, like right after, like when I was changing in the dressing room. He came in and asked me if I would train him. And I said, yeah, sure. I gave him my card. I didn't think he'd ever show up. And he showed up the next morning at my backyard gym. And we started training that day from then on, so that's how that started. But my feeling on Chuck from the beginning was super tough, hit really hard. And he had something that a lot of the fighters don't have, and it has nothing to do with skill or anything. It's just something there, that there's something, It was way different with Glover. Glover had that too, but it was different than Chuck's. And then some guys go all the way to the top or halfway to the top, and people don't know them as well. And then some people, they just have it. It's an X factor that we don't know what it is, but we know that I knew Chuck was going to go somewhere. I didn't know where. At that time, MMA was like not even really there, and if it was there, it was the super beginning. But Chuck was kickboxing, and you just knew like he was going to be something. You just knew, whatever it was, he had that. So that was that.
So he trained with you for 8 years before fighting at UFC 17. Did he do anything local, like any regional events, or was Noe Hernandez his first MMA fight?
Oh shit! I don't even know, because I don't know I can't go on the timeline. I know. Well, that was kickboxing. Yeah. So most of the stuff was kickboxing. I think he fought in a couple of those. Like the WEC stuff when it was like Tattoo Palace and stuff. That's when Scott Adams was promoting, and you had I can't remember all the other guys, but there was some Central California fights and even some Southern California fights. I'm trying to think if Chuck was on that card or not, but they were like in warehouses, and I remember they were underground because it was still illegal, So I remember it getting broken up once, and the cops came, and there were sirens, and we all just had to split, because they busted us. It was an underground one. So I don't remember how many. There was some underground stuff before the UFC. Yeah,
that's awesome.
Yeah. It was pretty wild time. I remember my guy was fighting a guy, and the guy my guy was fighting hurt himself pretty bad in the fight. And I'm a registered nurse, and I was like, oh shit, remember the fight was over, my guy won, but I was like trying to help the guy because his knee was, I think it was his knee. He was having a hard time walking him. I was trying to take him to the back and try to like bandage it up, give him some ace wrap. The fight, that's when the cops came. It was like, and we had this guy's like hopping. It's my guy's opponent, and he's like hopping. I'm trying to help him get away, get to his car to get out of there, because we're like cockroaches when someone turns on the light in the kitchen, and we all just scattered. And those are some pretty crazy times. But anyway, that's what I remember about that.
So it's kind of one of those situations. Once the cops get there, there's no I in team, but there's an E in me. I gotta go.
Yeah, everybody's split. Yeah, but anyway, so that's what I remember those days, because I would have Chuck in a boxing match and then a kickboxing match. Then MMA came in its infancy, and he started doing that too. So he kind of did a little of everything until he didn't anymore. And that's when the UFC came along, and that was his only, fighting then.
So May 15th, 1998, UFC 17, two-time Michigan State Golden Glove champion Noe Hernandez, who doesn't have like a really good record at this time, but he's one of Pat Militich's like top prospects. That was not an easy fight for Chuck. And it also kind of proved that Chuck was a hell of a nail. Like, obviously an incredible hammer, but he took some heavy punches and withstood them against Hernandez.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that was one of Chuck's strengths. That was one of Chuck's, that's what Chuck was known for in most of his career was, I would watch and I hate watching my fighters get hit, but with Chuck is like, you hate watching it, but he always came back swinging, and usually that's what got him started, get a couple hard hits in. He already had the takedown defense kind of was embedded in him already, and his defense just didn't really. It just was something he had a really hard time with, and that to me, I think that kind of hurt him towards the end of his career, obviously, but I mean, you can only like say keep your fucking hands up so many times before. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's like I think I said those. Keep your hands up. Those it's like those 4 words more than any other words in our whole career together. Keep your, because he wanted to just, he would do it in the gym. I even get him stuff where he'd have to put stuff under his arm when he was shadow boxing, like put a hand wrap right here or a bag glove and to keep his hand up. But then as soon as either he got hit or he hit the other guy, his hands would come down and he would just start swinging because that's what he wanted to do. And even towards the end of his career, when we saw that he wasn't getting hit as well, he's getting knocked out a little more. We tried to switch things up to more grappling, more wrestling. I mean, he does have a wrestling background. He has great takedowns, but he refused to give up his slugging style because he wanted to go out the way he came in on a shift,
Well,
so that's that.
His second fight on record, obviously there's a few between there, May 15th, August 23rd, 1998, you guys go to Brazil and you fight Pele Landi, who arguably top 5 in the world at this point in his career.
Yeah, and that showed like Chuck. It showed, where that first fight just showed how Chuck can take a punch, and come back to win, which he did so many of his fights. That fight in Brazil showed that he just had the all around. I'm fucking Valley Tudo here. You know what I mean? I mean, he took on the Valley Tudo guy and beat him at his own fucking game. And here's a kid from, Santa Barbara, California, who, has a college degree from Cal Poly in accounting. And he's out there in Brazil doing those fucking, head stomps, soccer kicks. I'm Valley Tudo here. Let's go. So I think that's the fight that showed that I'm here.
So that everybody says when you fight in Brazil, it's just different. Like the crowd is different. The people are. How hectic were you guys getting stuff thrown at you? Like I've seen clips of Mark Coleman cornering people out there, almost going into the crowd after people. Was it as heated as we've been told in the past?
It's Brazil. Yeah, Brazil is. I wasn't there for Chuck's Pele fight.
Pardon me?
Yeah, I wasn't there for Chuck's Pele fight. Yeah, I trained him.
Who did he go with?
What?
Who did he go with?
It was probably Scott Adams. Scott Adams was in this. It's me and Scott Adams was working with him, and I was working full time as a registered nurse with the kids at home, and I didn't get to go on that fight. So yeah, so I can't really speak for the crowd in that fight. I can speak of the crowd in Brazil in general, but not that fight.
Okay, that's fair. That's fair. Your first trip to Japan with Chuck is May 2001, Pride 14. The UFC, they seem to be like comfortable sending Chuck over there on cross promotion type fights more than anybody else. Guy Mezger is his opponent. Another really high end guy. I mean, Chuck is right out the gate with top competition.
Yeah, that's the UFC. You don't get like setups like you do in some organizations, some other combat sports. They'll give you tomato cans to build up your record, pad your record, whatever, or maybe better. So I kind of like that, and I kind of don't, but I like it when I need it. But the UFC wasn't having that. UFC, if you're in the UFC, you're fighting the top competition. Probably it's kind of like you could be AA baseball and you're not competing against the high level. But once you go to the majors, there's no tomato cans in Major League Baseball or the NFL, right? So there isn't the NFL. The UFC is like the NFL. Once you hit the UFC, there's no more tomato cans. You're fighting the best of the best. And Guy Mezger was a very scary opponent to train for, because I was watching. Obviously, I watched videos on the guys, and I was like, oh shit, this guy's good at everything. He looks like a pro boxer, a fucking jiu-jitsu black belt and a wrestling all rolled into one. So he was a tough one to follow. So we came up with a Metzger hook for that one, because I saw a little opening and he was a southpaw. So we worked on the Metzger hook, and that's one of the things that got chucked through that fight. If you notice, it was that hook coming up at a 45-degree angle, because I see that Metzger just kind of turned that corner when he was fighting, especially being a southpaw. But that was a tough fight too. That was probably my first. I think it was my first one where I really was worrying about the opponent, and had to go in, fight, opponent specific. Like most of Chuck's fights, we didn't know his opponent, or it was a tournament. There's going to be, maybe 4 possible opponents. But this fight with Metzger and the one in Japan was pretty. That was a pretty specific training camp. We're training for him. So that's that.
Well, speaking of specific training camps, June 7, 2002, WEC3, you coach Eric Schwartz to a knockout victory over Glover Teixeira. Eric Schwartz might be one of MMA's biggest what ifs.
Yeah. I actually have 2 of them. I have Eric Schwartz and Luke Rittering. Luke Rittering is now a deputy sheriff in our town, right? The sheriff is one of my black belts too, by the way. But anyway, so Luke Rittering was undefeated, like 14-0, beat everybody, and then and so was Eric Schwartz. Hit he dropped or hurt Glover while he was mounted. He hit up while he was mounted. No hip engagement, just hit Glover and hurt him from the bottom. Eric Schwartz was one of the hardest hitters. He was undefeated in MMA. Was he 3 or 4-0? And then he was undefeated in kickboxing. I think he was 10-0 or something. And now he owns with some of his friends. They own a bunch of bars and restaurants in the Central Coast. He's an entrepreneur and a business owner, and he owns some of the best restaurants in our county. So he's still around, and he's that's what he's doing. And him and Glover are really good friends.
Okay, so from what I understand in my brief research of Eric Schwartz, he's a high-end college wrestler. Am I correct?
Yeah. You know what? I can't. I don't know what high-end means, but he was on Cal Poly's wrestling team. That's when I met him, and he was Chuck's roommate.
Oh, so he was mounted by Glover after having that wrestling pedigree?
Yeah. You watch the fight. Yeah, and he got. I remember.
I can't find it.
Oh, he leaned up and he got hit. He hit Glover, and it hurt Glover, and that's how he got him. I think that's how that started the combination and the whatever to stop Glover. Yeah, maybe he got on top of him. I don't know. I don't remember. That was like 2000, early 2000s, man.
Yeah, 2002. Yeah. So afterward, the rumor is that Glover came over to your locker room and asked you to train him. Could you kind of clarify what took place?
It went the other way. It was the other way.
Okay.
Me and Chuck went into his locker room because we loved that fight and the way they were fighting and interacting, and Glover showed so much heart. And we knew that was Glover's first fight, just like it was Eric's. was both of their first fights, you know. So we went into Glover's dressing room just to tell him what a great job he did, and you know, and next thing you know, we were talking, and I think we invited him to come train. I don't think it was the other way around, but yeah,
Okay.
I could be wrong. Maybe my memory, I've been hit a lot, and that was a long time ago, but I'm pretty sure that me and Chuck said, you know, we could have used, you know, a training partner, somebody that would help him. And we really liked his attitude. So we asked him to come train with us.
So Eric Schwartz beats Glover Teixeira. You guys hook up at that event. You start training him. There's kind of a lot of questions. I shouldn't say kind of. There is a lot of questions in regards to why Glover was deported, his visa issues. Like it's never really been addressed. What exactly took place with all that?
It started with what's the guy's Cigano his fight, Sokoudjou fight, a fight which I didn't want to take at first, and then I did, and the UFC was looking at that fight. That was like the fight, you know. Yeah, the winner of that fight was going right to the UFC. There was a lot of hype. I mean, probably not in the UFC, I mean, the MMA world, but there was a lot of hype for us for that fight. And there was for their camp too, which was Dan Henderson, you know, that was the manager or trainer, whatever. And so that was a big fight for us, you know, and spent a lot of time Glover, you know, but we knew he had a couple tricks up his sleeve for Sokoudjou, and Sokoudjou fight was, you know, Glover Dana was going to be there, and everybody was there, and it was at the, you know, there was a lot riding on that fight, and when he won, all of a sudden we thought everything's great, you know. And then we found out there was that little glitch when he came across the border the first time. Not everything might have been completely legal. And it was told that, you know, he has to go back there to the consulate or whoever, you know, gets him over here. And he just has to do it again, do it the right way. And it would take a couple months at the most. You know, and then all of a sudden he went over there and it took a few years, you know, so he spent a lot of his time, a lot of his really good prime time over there in Brazil. He did get a lot of fights. He worked with a couple guys, you know, over there. He had the best leg kicker, you know, Pedro Rizzo. And then we had Marco Ruas and some of the other guys that he worked with. And so that, you know, it kind of held him back a little, but he was pretty busy there. He had quite a few fights while he was in Brazil. He even fought at heavyweight and, you know, but he's, you know, that we were waiting, you know, pushing for him to come back so he'd go to the UFC. And it took a lot longer than everybody thought, including Dana. I mean, the UFC was, you know, did a lot for him, and, you know, so did his wife. His wife was right there the whole time pushing and, you know, getting all these lawyers, immigration lawyers and stuff. And, you know, it took a lot longer than we thought. So he was stuck in Brazil for quite a while.
So in essence, he overstayed a work visa, or maybe his travel visa that was here. Yeah, man. I've heard nightmare stories, and it's just oftentimes when you hear of people having visa issues, usually there's like a criminal element involved with it. But it seems like the people that have the criminal element, they stay until their case is resolved and they get an extended time here. Yeah. But people that just have regular visa issues, they tend to kind of get a little bit more punished.
Yeah, and they follow the rules, you know. So
yeah.
So he did that thinking, I'm going to follow the rules. I'm going to go over there. It's going to take a couple months. I'm going to fill out all the right paperwork, and I'm coming back. The UFC was telling, our immigration people, hey, he has a good job when he gets here. He's going to be good for our country, basically. But it took years. So I don't know. There's that.
That's wild. Yeah. Yeah, that's wild. Well, you also maintained his loyalty while he's got 10 fights with a different camp. How difficult of a juggling act was that for you?
To what? I don't understand the question.
Why he stayed loyal to you? I mean, this guy went for 10 fights and trained with somebody else, and he maintained his loyalty. Like, there's something with yourself that just kind of, people don't like you. They might experience other coaches, but they really become loyal to that of yourself. And Glover Teixeira is a prime example of that.
Yeah. I've always been. It's more than a coach. Like with Chuck's, like, family right now. He's still like family. We're not like friends, buddies. We don't go out partying, or we never did that kind of stuff. But Glover's the same. It's never. And you can do whatever you want. Just I'm going to be here as more than just a coach. I mean, he's one of my black belts. That means a lot. He runs one of our affiliate gyms, in Connecticut, where he promotes people under us, and we meet in Hawaii every year. And there's a whole other part to our martial arts relationship than just fighting. MMA fighting isn't my biggest deal by a long shot. I mean, my main thing is Hawaiian Kempo and my system and the pit and my kids and my, the kids I train and my students. And some of them happen to be fighters. Like, okay, look at Ramsey Nijam, Court McGee. Those are my students. But I don't love traveling. In fact, I hate traveling. I don't like doing camps. I don't like doing that. I'll go if I have to go. If you really want me to, I'll go. But know that I don't want to go. Know that I don't want to work the corner. Know that I don't want to have to think about throwing in a towel or making sure my fighter isn't getting beat up or getting hurt. So training fighters is about 3% of what I do. The other 97 is teaching Hawaiian Kempo and being a Hawaiian Kempo instructor and running the pit as a ohana or as a family. And if guys want to fight, some of them I'll train. Some of them don't train with me, but they're still part of my gym. Like Court McGee and Ramsey Nijam. Ramsey Nijam has a pit in Salt Lake City. I haven't trained him, for many of his fights either. But he's still one of my black belts and one of my students. So I don't. Maybe they know I hate it. They know Glover knew how much I hated training fighters and working the corners. In fact, when he came back to me to work his last few fights, he said, the first thing he said was, "Hey, coach, I know you hate this. I know you hate traveling. I know you hate training fighters, but can you just train me in my last few fights? I don't have many left. And let's finish. I want to finish the way we started." So I was like, okay, I'll do that. And he knows. He said, "I know you hate it, and I really appreciate it." So I did, and so that was that. I'm more of a sensei than a coach or trainer, a fight trainer. That's like I said, 3% of what I do, not the 97%.
That's fantastic. So the Underground Forum on mixedmartialarts.com, we put out a general feeler for questions that people might want to hear from you. The example asked, the most difficult moment for you as a trainer.
There's been a few, especially Chuck's ending. But I'm going to say it was Glover's last fight. Without it.
Yeah.
That was it. It was Glover's last fight. And my inability for a few reasons not to impose my wants. I'm not going to say impose my will, but okay, I imposed my will on the end on that fight, and for a lot of reasons. So that was probably the hardest fight. I broke that fight broke me. That was probably oh, you know what? One other one, the second one was the opposite. It was my son fighting. My son fought, and it was one of his wins. It bothered me so much because I saw him beating the guy up so bad, and I just broke down. I just couldn't believe that my son could hurt someone, and it played with my mind. It's like, I don't mind doing it when I was fighting, but watching my fighters, I mean, I almost threw in the towel for a couple of Chuck's fights. Like when he fought Jeremy Horn, I was this close to throwing the towel because I was looking at his camp going, he's throwing the towel. He's getting the shit kicked out of him. I don't want my fighter to cause your fighter brain damage. Throw in the fucking towel. So I was like, and luckily, it stopped when it did. But that was, and so like when my son beat this guy so bad, I was like, how did I raise a son to be so mean? That was a hard one for me. That was a hard fight. I mean, I broke down. I had a breakdown. My poor wife, I'm sobbing. How could he do that to that poor guy? So I'm a wreck as a trainer. I'm telling you right now. I'm a mess. Chuck would, in the corner before the fights, Chuck would say, "You ready? You ready, John? Relax. This is gonna be fun. Let's go." It's like, all right, well, make sure you do this and do this and do this. In the corner. I mean, in the dressing room before the fight. Glover knew how nervous I got, and he'd be like, "Coach, relax, man. We're gonna have some fun." One fight, we're walking out. I can't remember which one it was. We're walking out, and you come out through the caravan, and the cameras are on us, and we're walking out to the cage to fight. I mean, Glover's, it's one of Glover's fights, and he stops, and it's like the crowd is going crazy, and he stopped the whole caravan. There's like 20 of us walking out, security and all that. And I think it was in Vegas. I can't remember where this fight was, but he stops just to fuck with me because he knows how nervous I get. And he goes, "Hey coach, I don't want to do this, man. What should I do? I don't want to fight tonight." He was playing with me, so I was like, "Okay, let's go then. Let's just leave." And he goes, and then he started laughing. He goes, I'm joking. Let's have some fun." So yeah, Glover and those guys.
Glover is just different. Like he's
cut from a different cloth. He is. Yeah, he's different. But you know what? He is different. And so is Chuck. And they're so different, but they're so, they're both complete warriors. They're both completely humble. They're both completely down to earth. They're both complete, but they're so different. They're so different in so many ways, but they were so similar in their ohana, just their family. They were the loyal, just loyal heart. Their heart was so loyal and tough at the same time, and kind. They'll never treat anybody with anything but the utmost respect. They don't. A guy asking for autographs, they treat him like gold. Some of these fighters, you'll see him, "I don't have time for autographs," and they'll, Chuck and Glover's never turned down an autograph or a picture. Never.
That's fantastic. IP from the Underground Forum asks, looking back at the careers of both Teixeira and Chuck Liddell, is there anything you would have done differently?
Yeah. I mean, they're with Chuck. Yeah, man, I would maybe trying harder to engage his wrestling more towards the end, but we all tried, and he wouldn't do it. So maybe, I don't know, making him do it more. Maybe that with him, and with Glover, stopping his last fight.
Wow. Tony D'Souza, go ahead.
Yeah, but I wasn't allowed to, but I don't wish I did, but I kind of do. I think that bad would have outweighed the good in stopping that fight, especially how it ended. I thank God every day that the last round went the way it did, and in Glover's last fight, and the last round wasn't more like the third and fourth rounds.
Yeah. He's a hell of a nail. Like he's a Glover.
The toughness of Glover Teixeira is you can't put it into words. And unless you were in the corner of that last fight, just looking at him, you'll never realize what the toughness is just unfucking believable.
Yeah, he's the guy that gets ran over by a car, jumps up, and tries to tell everyone he's okay.
When he met, we met him in the restaurant after the fight, and we're all depressed. We're all just so down for him, and we're so sad for him. And he comes into the restaurant of the hotel. He's like, "Cheer up, guys! It's just a fight, man. Fucking cheer up, guys. I'm fine. Quit looking so sad." He was trying to, put us in a better mood. That's how shitty we were and how good he was. He was trying to cheer us up after that fight, after those 5 fucking rounds. We're over there sobbing like we're the ones that got the shit kicked out of us. And he's coming back telling us to cheer up.
Shit. Yeah,
that's fucking Glover. That's Glover. That is Glover Teixeira right there.
V-Rill from the Underground Forum. Tony D'Souza, did he learn the Peruvian necktie at the pit? And did Jason Van Flue learn the Van Flue at the pit? If not, where did they get it from?
I'll say yes to Van Flue, obviously the Van Flue choke. And but I think the credit goes to, for that one, I'm going to say the credit goes to Scott Adams. Remember Scott Adams?
WEC, come on. Yeah, absolutely, of course.
But he was also an undefeated UFC fighter.
8-1 with the pit, ended on a 7-fight win streak. That's Scott Adams.
But he was undefeated in the UFC.
Yes, yeah. Correct. Yep.
So he was the submission guy. So any kind of submission guys, he'll take credit. But yes, that was for Van Flue. For Tony D'Souza, I remember him, and I remember training him. But again, if that is true, and I don't know if it is or isn't, if it is true, I'm going to have to give credit to Scott Adams again.
That's incredible.
Or who else maybe gets credit for that would be John. We got John Lewis.
I think John Lewis is incredibly underappreciated as one of the foundational support of MMA. Yeah,
and I think if I'm not mistaken, I could be mistaken, but I think he had more to do with that Tony D'Souza guy than people know, and I think it's either Scott Adams or John Lewis. But but I remember him training with us, and we loved him, and he fit right in, but he had stuff going on all over the place.
So I tried to get him in an interview, and I did all my research because his hands stirring the pot of early mixed martial arts is super next level. And he's just like, bro, I'm doing airplane rides to outer space right now. That's what I'm organizing. So he just closed that chapter and moved on. John Lewis, I respect a lot.
Yeah. He had a big part in Chuck's career. He really did. He's underreported and documented. He had a bigger part in Chuck's career than a lot of people think. But Chuck's career is pretty well documented. So people know he was there, especially in the beginning. And his Chuck really looked up to him and respected him on his once the fight hit the ground. So
UFC 88, September 6th, 2008, Rashad Evans versus Chuck. Do you think Rashad intentionally threw that low kick in order to make Chuck lower his hands?
I don't know. I didn't ask him, but I I don't know. I mean, it looked like he just stepped in and that that overhand landed. I don't know. More. I think more for that punch, to be honest. And I don't know. I could ask him, but I think that punch is more. You just look down and do a takedown, like it's a look low, attack high, look low, attack high, or look high, attack low. We do that a lot. And all you do is look down and somebody just drops their hands just a little bit. And then you come in like you're going low and then just bring that hand over the top. And that overhand lands real well. Like my guy, Antonio Banuelos, he was such a takedown guy, kind of a shorter guy, and he did a lot of takedowns. But we've drilled that into him, and he got at least, I think, 2 knockouts, good knockouts, fake a shot, come in with an overhand right. I think that's what the fight with I think that's what ended the fight. But I don't know what Rashad did first. I think it was more he just fake low and then came high with the overhand.
That's fair. Dana White, after this fight, insisted Chuck Liddell train elsewhere, including setting up a camp with the American Top Team. Was there any animosity at this point between yourself and Dana White?
Yeah, there was. There was. We went back and forth in the press a couple times saying negative things about each other, and I apologized for the things I said. I don't know if he ever did, but I do. And I think he had Chuck's best interest in heart, just like I did, but we were coming from different angles. Chuck didn't do great when he was training, elsewhere, and he ended up actually that wasn't the fight that he had Chuck training elsewhere. That was when he was fighting. That's when he was going to fight the second Pride one with Rampage. He had Chuck train somewhere else for that fight.
Okay.
The ATT fight where the American Top Team was. I had a relationship with Laborio, Ricardo Laborio. We're very close, and we trained each other's fighters, and we thought it would be better for Chuck to do some work over there, just because there were so many bodies. So we went over. I went over there with Chuck, as I did with some of my other fighters, and he sent some of his fighters to me. We had quite a few ATT guys coming over here, including AKA. We also had that relationship with AKA. We even had guys like Kyle Kingsbury come train with us. Then he had to fight Glover, which was a nightmare. But the fight that Dana had Chuck train somewhere else, and Chuck didn't want to, but we said, we discussed it. We said we'll give it a shot. And he went somewhere else and he trained, I think it was in LA mainly. Could have been Vegas. But I remember Chuck calling me and going over stuff. We would talk almost every night about stuff he should be going over. But it didn't really work out that well. He said his conditioning didn't feel as good and stuff like that. And I ended up going with him for the fight. It was when he fought Rampage. I ended up throwing the towel in for that fight. But that's the fight that Dana had him go somewhere else and train. And it was a camp that Dana set up. It was like, this guy's going to be your grappling guy. This guy's going to be your striking guy. You're going to have a conditioning guy. But, Chuck was used to just doing all at one place pretty much. And he did not like that training methodology at all. And that's the last time he's done that. ATT was a little different.
Sometimes when you're going different places for different specialties, everybody takes on the head coach role.
Yeah.
And sometimes there's too many chefs in the kitchen.
It didn't work well. Yeah, that's why Ricardo called me when Glover was over there for one of his fights, and he said, "Hey, I'm having a hard time with with Glover doing this, and this. Can you just come over here and finish up his camp?" And I was like, "Bro, I'm like fucking across the country. Seriously? Okay, I'm there." So I flew over, and they got me a room and stuff. I stayed over there.
I will tell you, Ricardo Laborio, even making that phone call is done with just the utmost respect for you and incredible care for the fighter.
Oh, he's yeah. And that's true. And me and Ricardo, we're very, very close. And we shared a couple fighters back and forth. In fact, it's funny, I'm not going to name any names, but one of the fighters thought he might be fighting Chuck while I was over there with a couple of my other fighters. And the fighter came into Laborio's office and said, "Can you please get him off the mat right now? He's taking videos and I might be fighting Chuck. I want him the fuck off out of the gym." And Ricardo said, "I don't give a shit what you want. John can stay here where he can video whatever he wants. He can stay here as long as he wants. And if you don't, I trust him. He's not trying to spy on us." So the guy thought he was trying to be I was trying to go over there and be a spy. And Ricardo told him to get the fuck out of here. And so that was kind of awkward.
Laborio's the man. He's one of our.
I still love Laborio. When I say still,
one of our
this much longer, me not having any fighters or anything, and we're still in touch. I still love Laborio.
Yeah, he's one of my favorite interviews that I've done. All right, let's talk about Liddell Couture 1, June 6, 2003, UFC 43. Easily, at this moment, possibly the biggest fight in UFC history.
Yeah, I never thought of it that way, but okay. Maybe the numbers show that. I don't know. I never thought of it as the biggest one. But it was a big one for me, that's for sure. That's for damn sure. That was kind of like that was a little like Rocky 3, Chuck was starting to get a little Chuck had a propensity towards I don't know, towards having a good time,
Okay.
And he's been winning some fights and he's getting freaking huge, right? So now all of a sudden, he's becoming the guy. And and Randy is a lot more of a cerebral guy and a lot more of just a down to earth, all-American. He was in the Army and Chuck was like the guy with the mohawk, the knockout punch. He was more of a so the crowd kind of like he was a little more entertaining than
fan favorite for sure.
Yeah, Randy had a beautiful style. It was great style, very effective, Greco, upper body, a lot of clinching up against the cage. But Chuck was the knock you out. So people like that more, People like that more than the grappling. You have two guys grappling and you have two guys striking. Everybody's going to gravitate towards the two guys striking. Grappling is great and all until striking comes along. Then it's not. But anyway, with that said, what people don't know the backside of that is I was Matt Lilland's trainer.
Yes.
So working his corner, he even brought a bunch of guys over, like that guy that's always getting arrested, the guy that killed himself, the guy that's he's mentally handicapped and he was on the team, but he fought Glover actually. Forget his name.
You talking about Matt Horowitz.
Yeah, fucking guy is so good. And he was like, he had some mental issue. And I even talked to his mom, and his mom was like, "Hey, he loves fighting. I'm going to let him fight as long as he wants." And he was so damn good. so Matt sent him out with me. So I was training him. He was living in my office for a while, such a nice guy. But so Randy came over, and I was telling Randy how he doesn't, we're talking about some ground and pound. I was telling him he doesn't generate enough power, so I was working on some power punching with him, and he ended up beating Chuck that way. If you remember the end of that fight, that's when they stopped it. So so there was a whole backside.
Yeah.
They were training together. I worked a lot with that camp, and I even I even went to Oregon a bunch of times and trained with Team Quest, including Randy. So there was, they were close. I mean, they weren't like, best friends, but they knew each other pretty well, and so when they fought, there was there was no bad blood at all. But Chuck now is starting to win. Then there's an after party. He's living that life, He's living the after party life. And so when he fought, I think that was a wake up call for him when he fought Randy Couture the first fight, and the camp got back to a little more old school, and so.
Seriously.
Anyway, that's what I remember most about that fight.
Well, if you look at Tito Ortiz's title run, it's almost like a Floyd Patterson, Sonny Liston type situation where you've got the champion with the belt, but then you got Sonny Liston just kind of clearing out the competition. Like, if you look at Tito Ortiz, he beats Wanderlei Silva. This is like a 185 Wanderlei. Then he beats Yuki Kondo, another 85-pounder, Evan Tanner, legit, Sinisic, Matt Yancheko, Ken Shamrock, Couture. At that same time, you've got Liddell with Jeff Monson, Savage, Kevin Randleman, Savage, Guy Mezger, super tough, Bustamante, Amir Suluev, Vitor Belfort, Babalu, and then Couture. Like, if you look at the difference of names there, that scale is real heavy on one side. Do you feel that when this was going down, that Tito was being protected?
No, never. I don't think I mean, you can put a bunch of names and for different reasons, and this guy might be better than this guy along the way, but I've never thought of Tito's career when I look, and obviously I studied Tito a lot because we fought him, more than once. But I never ever thought. I thought he was, if anything, I just thought he was I thought the opposite. I never looked at Tito as anything being protected in any way, shape, or form. The way I felt, and that's the way I felt about Chuck too, and that's the way I felt about Randy. I don't see that with I saw that later, maybe a little with that guy that was a pro wrestler, the kind of, goofy guy that came in the UFC for a fight or two. He looked like he got kind of, maybe he wasn't thrown to the wolves right away. But I thought Tito was one of the pioneers who just took on all comers. That's what I thought. But maybe you study this stuff more than I do, so maybe he was brought along, and he was brought along so well, even guys like me thought, oh, this guy came up the hard way. I never thought Tito was given hand-picked opponents ever. I mean, okay, I'll give you one.
That's fair.
Look what Rashad did to Chuck, right? I think Tito fought Rashad too, right? So I don't think he was
not as champion. Not as champion.
No, I'm just saying, talking about overall, throwing, giving people easier fights. Is that what you're talking about?
Well, if you look at the scale, and you're going to have people step on it in regards to like their talent level, it seemed like the guys, rather than Chuck fight Tito, they had Chuck fight the guys that should have fought Tito, and then they just kept avoiding the Chuck Tito fight, which I mean, it's pretty well documented that fight took a long time to put together.
Now I see what you're talking about. So I think I don't think Tito wanted to fight Chuck. I agree with that, and I think he had some say over his opponents, and I think he was avoiding Chuck for a while. But I don't think the UFC as a promotion company was trying to give Tito easier fights. I don't think they were doing that. I think Tito just didn't want to fight Chuck, so they were trying to bring in guys until they can make the fight. That's what I think.
That's fair. Babalu is somebody that aggressively pursued Tito, including being on camera, giving Tito the finger, telling him that he was going to have sex with him if they ever fought with each other, with condom or without, up to Tito. And that fight never took place, but it was almost as if they kept feeding Babalu to Chuck, although it was only 2 times, to kind of deflate that. Did you feel it was almost punishment for Babalu to fight Chuck rather than be matched up against Tito?
First of all, the sex thing kind of bothers me.
That's Babalu. That's Babalu, not me.
Because I've seen Mike Tyson has done that before. I think there's one other fighter that's done that. Where is your mind when you're thinking about fucking your opponent? It's weird.
John, I can actually have a response to this. I think it's, never mind the trash talk. There's no other back and forth. Now we have to fight. I think it's more in that aspect than an actual act.
It's like, I mean, I could see like you're trying to pick up a chick in a bar and you go, hey, we're gonna have great sex. But before you fight an opponent, like thinking about them sexually in any way, shape, or form is bizarre. That's a weird thought. There's got to be some weird fantasies going on in Babalu's mind before he said that. But anyway, back to your topic. I don't think that. I never did, but it could be. I just thought of it as an opponent, and he was a scary opponent too. He's another one that I had to go really hard on videos and just this guy was like fucking good everywhere again. He was kind of like a Brazilian version of Mezger, just good everywhere, but a little more animalistic, a little bigger, a little stronger. But he still had he was good. He had good hands, good wrestling.
National wrestling team for Brazil. Yeah.
So that's where the Babalu kick came in. We came up with the Babalu kick. And if you saw it, you saw how that worked. Because he was a little too heavy on the takedowns when he started feeling threatened on his feet. He did desperation shots sometimes. So we felt like the desperation shot would be his Achilles heel, and it was.
Total Elimination Pride, August 10, 2003. Alister Overeem is Chuck's opponent. And this is really the first time that it was almost as if Dana wanted to see, hey, I'm going to show you guys that the UFC is the best. And he sends Chuck over there. Was there a lot of pressure on yourself getting Chuck ready for that fight?
Yeah. Yeah, but the pressure was from me. And I had pressure for every fight, including the lowest level, Tachi Palace, Indian casino fights to my fighters, to the top UFC fight. There's no more pressure on me. That was probably the biggest fight. Just in the hoopla and the leading up to it. And he's a fucking scary opponent, especially, that they allowed. Well, they technically allow it, but they said they didn't allow steroids, but we all knew they did. That's why so many of those guys were huge until they came to the UFC. And I knew, I knew that and it's funny because he wasn't jacked yet. So, you knew those guys were doing the UFC, the steroids, but he was like, he was just muscular but thin, and he was barely 200 pounds back then, you know. But we knew that it was that, and he had that Dutch, you know, like style. And I was worried. My biggest worry was a flying knee. That was my biggest issue for that fight. So we tried to get around that as much as I could and land his own, you know, stuff. But that was a big fight, yeah.
Oh, for sure. What about the payday difference? I know Japan paid more than the UFC. Who picked up Chuck's tab?
Yeah, yeah, I don't know. I don't know who signed the check. I got my checks from. I didn't pay attention who paid Chuck. That's how I got paid, always the same way. So I have no idea. I don't know how Dana split that with who's the Yakuza guys, right? The Pride guys. I forget their names.
Yeah, in any funny business over there in regards to?
Yeah, you know, the funniest thing was they had this guy, and everybody told me that it was all run by the Yakuza and it was a crime organization, and you know, it was a lot different over there. Everything was different. It's in Japan, but there was this one guy, and he was an Asian guy. I think he was Japanese, and he had a badge like to get backstage. And I wasn't really paying that much attention, but me and Chuck were over here doing this. And then we saw security go up and grab him. And like, they were really rough with him, a lot rougher than our security. And they grabbed him and they pulled him into this room. And that room was the office of the owner of Pride, the Yakuza guy, right?
Saki Kibara.
Yeah, I don't know his name, but he walks in there, and me and Chuck are outside the door trying to listen. And we hear some yelling, and we're looking at each other, going, that fucking guy is screwed, man. Oh my God. Because one of the workers told us, yeah, he was trying to fake a badge. So he had either stolen someone or taken someone's badge or forged a badge, a backstage pass. And they don't take that, they don't take that shit lightly in Japan. You know, that's disrespect and da 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 da. So we heard the guys yelling, and me and Chuck were like, I would not want to be that guy, man. So anyway, Chuck fought, and then we're back in the lobby of the hotel after the fight, and the guy comes into the lobby, the guy that had the fake badge and got roughed up. He came in a wheelchair with a broken leg into the hotel lobby, and I guess he was some journalist from Japan who tried to forge a backstage pass because he couldn't get a press pass. And I guess whatever they did to him in that room, he came out with a cast and he was with in a wheelchair. Chuck and I laughed so hard, we actually started crying. It was so funny.
Well, that's one way to deter people from trying to rip you off. That's for sure. Dana went out there with you guys with those trips.
Okay.
What was the interaction like? Because I know you two at this time weren't really seeing eye to eye, I believe. How were you guys on that trip?
We were, you know, hey, what's up? You know, walk by, you know, he was kind of bad mouthing me here and there, and I was bad mouthing. It was pretty mutual, the bad mouth thing. But we agreed that we both loved Chuck. He loved Chuck. I know he did. And he looked out for Chuck. He was looking out for Chuck's number one, Chuck's interest first. And one of the big things happened was towards the end of Chuck's career, he wanted Chuck to just retire. Now he could have made that happen, but he didn't. But somebody asked me in the press, do you think Chuck should retire? And I said, yes, but it's up to Chuck, not me, not Dana, nobody but Chuck. Chuck's a grown man. And if he wants to retire, which I've asked him not to fight since the beginning. I just want to run a martial arts school. I don't want to be a fight trainer. I never did. But he wanted to, that was his dream. So he wants to end his dream. So Dana took that as me saying, no, I want Chuck to fight more. Because I want to take Chuck's money, So that was where Dana came at it. And that's what bothered me, making like, I don't really care about Chuck's best interest. But at the end of the day, Dana could have just had him not fight at any time. Dana had more power over Chuck's fighting than I did. He runs the show. I just trained the guy. So, you
can make, it's a hell of an argument. You want him to retire? Pay him. Yeah, you want him to retire? Pay him.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So we went back and forth. Some sniping in the press, and at the end of the day, we realized we're both looking out for Chuck. We both love Chuck. So let's just get along. We ended up shaking hands. We met in Vegas once at some event, and he came up and let's bury the hatchet. We shook hands, and I think he's done such a good job with the UFC. I can't, even though there's certain things I don't agree with him on, I think what he's done for all these guys is I'm one of his biggest advocates. People, they don't pay enough in the UFC. They're Dana keeps all the money, and when they start talking about that shit, it's like it drives me nuts, because even though I've had my ups and downs with Dana, that kind of talk, drives me nuts.
Sitting in my seat, I'm a historian. It's real easy for me to like kind of poke holes in the ship or go, look at this, look at that. What that guy's done for the sport, man, he's a generational promoter. I take my hat off. The guy, what he has done has caused me a divorce. It has, made me team up with business partners that eventually went to prison. It has introduced me to some of the greatest people I've ever met, as well as, incredible life stories. And he's the reason for it. Like, he's the one that orchestrated everything and put the UFC where it's at today. Yeah, I've got a shitload of respect for him, man. Big time.
I do too. And we've had our ups and downs, but like I said, I watched what he's done to this organization, and I have nothing but respect for the guy. And if you want, like I said, we've sniped back and forth a few times, but to me, that's water under the bridge.
Well, you also clarified in one of your interviews, you said, okay, if I don't want Chuck to fight and Chuck wants to fight, would you want me to kick him out of the gym so somebody else can handle him? He's like, whether I agree with him fighting or not, I'd rather at least be a part of it than throwing him as somebody that might not care as much as me. I thought your stance was, 100% accurate. Like I
want to be there and be able to stop the fight if I have to,
Yeah, no, for sure.
Because I know nobody else is gonna.
Rampage Jackson, we talked a little bit about it earlier in that Pride final conflict.
Yeah.
In your opinion, what didn't go right in that fight with Chuck?
I think that's the fight that Dana had him do this training camp thing that was supposed to be state of the art, the best training camp ever. He's going to be in, and Chuck was tired like 3 minutes in. That was the worst shape I've ever seen Chuck in. That was so I threw in the towel, obviously, you see that if you see that fight. I just think he was ill prepared, and his conditioning was nowhere where it should have been. And Rampage was Rampage. Rampage is, I mean, look at the second fight, so it's like Rampage, is one of the best light heavyweights ever, and I thought he was ill prepared for it. And then by the second one, I think he was like the first one, I don't think he was hurt. He didn't get hurt at all. I just looked at him on the ground. He was in a precarious position, and it didn't look like he was in a position. He was in a state of mind or physically to get up. And I could see his breathing, and he was just he was done. And that was one of the fights. So wasn't it a 10 and then a 5-minute round, something like that?
Yes.
I don't remember. All I remember was I saw his face, and I knew that he wasn't getting hurt, but he wasn't going to get better. This fight wasn't going to get any better. He was done.
It was determined. It was
I
determined.
saw he was done. Towel went in. I stopped it. Boom. The second fight, it was Chuck being Chuck, dropping his hands, and by then he was on. His chin was starting to go, and that's what happened with that fight. And Rampage is a fucking great fighter. I can't. I'm making an excuse for Chuck. I'm saying what Chuck did wrong, but at the end of the day, Rampage is just it was Rampage. So, boom.
Absolutely. Chuck Liddell, Tito, Ortiz, another fight that was arguably at this point the biggest fight in UFC history, something that took a while to come together.
Yeah.
Was there a mental edge going into this fight on Chuck's end?
Yeah, because this is the first guy he's ever fought that he didn't like. So I've never seen him train that way before. And I knew he was gonna come out different. And I think that them training together and he was already inside of the head and under the skin of Tito because he can manhandle him when they train together. So I think I knew Tito was thinking that. So as much as I love Tito, and I think he was a really, really, really good fighter, but I think he would have been better a little lighter, maybe 85, maybe. But he was. I think he's one of the legends and pioneers of this sport. But Chuck always had his number, until until that last stupid fight. But
yeah. You the tap out entrance for Chuck. Were you guys privy to what was going to be played for Chuck's walkout?
No, I don't even know what it was.
Yeah, dude, it's not good.
Was it Ice?
Like, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I think Chuck. I never really paid attention to those kind of things.
Okay, you were in Cesar Gracie's corner for Frank Shamrock.
Yeah, I threw in the towel too early, but it saved me, and I love Cesar Gracie. But the fact that he did get hit and get stopped, and I'm not glad he did. I wish he didn't, but the towel was a little premature, and I admit that. I love Cesar Gracie, and I didn't want to see him get hurt. I didn't want him to take this fight. I told him that, but he still wanted me to work his corner. So I told you, I'm going to protect you no matter what. You're my friend more than So no, I think this is a dumb fight for you to take. There's so many other guys you should be fighting. And he's like, I want to fight Frank Shamrock. I want to fight the top of the MMA, food chain. That was his first MMA fight. And last, thank God he never fought again. But he's a jiu-jitsu and an MMA trainer phenom, but he's not an MMA fighter phenom, and he never trained for one. That was his first fight ever. So anyway.
Yeah, Cesar's phenomenal. I mean, he's savage. Sokoudjou versus Glover, you talked about a little bit. You've got Team Quest versus the Pit.
What's funny about that fight, the funniness, it was a Team Quest thing against us, and we trained with them so much. Not the one in Temecula, but the one in Oregon. But Dan Henderson called me for that fight. He goes, "Hey, I got a guy. Glover's been winning. My guy's been winning. I got a guy for Glover." And I go, "Who is it?" He told me, and I've been hearing that name like, "Oh shit, he's really badass." I go, "Nah, you know what, man? I'm good. I'm gonna take my time with Glover. We're in no rush right now. I'm gonna go look for someone else." And he's like, "Oh, you're fucking scared, aren't you? You're like a mother hen. You're trying to protect your little fighters. How are they gonna get better if you protect them so much?" I go, "Bro, don't worry about it. I'll pick and I'll pick his opponents. I just don't want him to fight Sokoudjou right now. Maybe down the road. He goes, you're a mother hen. He was teasing. We're friends.
Yeah, of course.
But he was laughing at me. And then I hung up the phone and I was like, oh, shit. Let me look at this guy. So I started going through YouTube and other videos and all the, the different online things. I started checking out Sokoudjou and watching his fights with a little more interest. I was like, oh, she's that Glover could beat him right now. Because I hear the hype, but when I was watching him, I was like, I think Glover could beat him. So I called Dan back. I said, you know what? Let's take the fight. He goes, all right. So they took the fight. He saw what happened, and boom, that was it.
So Glover knocks out Sokoudjou. Here's the thing about this fight. Sokoudjou right after that gets wins over Ricardo Arona and Big Gnome. Like, legendary run within 5 fights. On the other hand, this is the third opponent from Team Quest for Teixeira. He fought Horwich and he fought Ed Herman. So it was almost as if they were just keying on Glover for some reason.
No, I think we were close. We were close with the Team Quest guys in Oregon, but I don't think that had anything to do with
Okay.
I don't think that had anything to do with Dan. Dan already was kind of splitting off of the Team Quest in Oregon, and they were kind of 2 different camps, Temecula one and the Oregon one. But I think the reason could have been is because we were really close with them and we were training with those guys too. So maybe that's why they set up those opponents, because I don't know why, but we were training with Team Quest guys a lot.
Okay. UFC 39, Gan McGee meets Pedro Hizo in one of the most savage friggin' fights that I saw in a long time up until that point. Pedro Hizo, his durability, but the cut from the head clash of Kevin Randleman just opened up and he couldn't breathe. Who do you recall being in Gan's corner?
That was probably the most technique, one-dimensional training that we ever had in a training camp, because watching Pedro, who ended up becoming a good friend of mine. I hate talking about that fight because I love Pedro, but I remember just the leg kick, and there's the counter for that leg kick. I knew was gonna be Gan's payday, and so we just pretty much that whole fight was him checking out the leg kick in a street fight way, instead of lifting it up like a Muay Thai way, just putting all his weight on his front leg and throwing that right hand at the same time as the kick. And if you see, that's what hurt Pedro and dropped him. I don't know if it dropped him. I think it hurt him real bad. I don't know if it dropped him or not, but it was just that right hand timing, and it worked so perfect for Gan. That was pretty much the extent of that training camp, was focusing on making Pedro's leg kick his demise, and making him pay desperately for having the audacity to try to hurt Gan McGee's leg. So you try to, when somebody, I've never had a fighter stop with leg kicks ever. That's a pretty good. I'm knock on wood, but I don't want to, hope that never happens. So I've never had a fighter lose a fight off leg kicks. So we have leg checking down pretty good. So this was like the perfect example of it. If I was to brag about or teach a class or a seminar on leg checks, that would be that fight would be it.
Can you tell us about working out with BJ Penn?
Just he's a phenom. I was on his Ultimate Fighter, that one too. But we're friends. I mean, we didn't know each other because we're far apart in age, but being from Hawaii and he's from Hawaii, we share kind of a local vibe and a feeling of what it's like to be a fighter in Hawaii is a lot different than being a fighter in mainland America. Growing up in Hawaii, it's not like a different state, it's like a different country, because the culture is so different than any other state that I've ever been to. So we shared that, and when he came, we liked him, so we became friends with him, and he came out and trained with us. Obviously he was working more on his jiu-jitsu and grappling, and I was working with him on more, striking and defending takedowns and stuff like that. So we became friends more than training partners, but we became buds, and he would come help Chuck, and I would send guys over there like Antonio Banuelos, spent a lot of time in Hilo training with BJ for some of his fights. I also had a couple other fighters about his weight that we would send over there, because Hawaii is sometimes hard to find, training partners. So I sent some of my guys over there, and we're friends. We're still friends today. He saw my sister lives in Hilo now, and they just did a video for me because they ran into each other, and they took a video saying hi to me and stuff. So, we're still close. We're still in touch, and I love. He'd probably be one of the top 3 all-time MMA guys ever in my book.
I agree, and people will look at a record and have some misconceptions, but if you look at the record, everything that you just said that came out of your mouth is 100% cemented. Agreed. Yeah, Tim Kennedy got to start in the pit, when the pit started becoming a fight gym, being known as the fight gym, and most of that is because of Chuck, not because of me. If my gym is a Hawaiian Kempo gym, and it's not an MMA gym, so when Chuck came along, and I knew that we had to change things to make Chuck's fighting career, more successful. That it opened up the door for a lot of people that wanted to fight. Tim Kennedy being one of them. He was young at the time, but he showed Tim was just a hard-nosed, really strong, talented kid. His father was a cop. He grew up in the Central Coast here, and he would just go in and bang. I had to, sometimes we had to look out for him a little bit, because he would be willing to go in there and bang, toe to toe with someone like Chuck, and that's not really conducive to a long, profitable, career, or even thinking straight for very long. So he was too tough for his own good, but when that toughness was needed, not only to defend his country and become a hero, it also showed up in the cage a lot. So that toughness that was shown early, and we had to watch it, because you can't be too tough with someone who's bigger, stronger, and a lot more skilled and experienced than you are. Then you got to kind of tone it down a little. But he was never a tone it down kind of guy. And in the end of the day, it ended up being true. That's true.
But at the end of the day, it ended up being his bread and butter. And look where he is now. He's a fucking legend.
Yeah.
Not only in the sport of MMA, but in the country of the USA as a hero to us. So he's like the best of all worlds.
I agree. All-star. Anything he puts his mind to, he's an all-star. Preston Sharp.
Yeah, I don't know.
You remember wrestler? Okay. Scott Lightly.
I remember him. But I mean, what do I know about him?
Well, just a little background. Just kind of peppering questions. We're wrapping up too, so I'm just kind of getting some guys on the way up. Preston Sharp.
Preston Sharp. He was came to my gym a long time ago. We had a little thing about he said he could take me down, and we had a long sparring thing. But then we became friends after that, and he had a rough road. he did things, the hard way, and he was there in the beginning, fighting in the shows when they were illegal, and he was more a wrestler than a striker, and part of the team. I don't really know him that much.
Okay. All right, we're gonna wrap up with this. Wanderlei Silva, Chuck Liddell fought at UFC 79, December 29, 2007. Got pretty intense during weigh-ins. Hockey from the Underground Forum asked, who was the first person that you had your eyes on to strike at the weigh-ins when you took your sandals off?
Slippers, not sandals.
Your slippers. Apologize.
Sandals are like what Jesus wore.
Okay.
Slippers are like what I wear. I don't know. But anyway, I honestly thought, I didn't know the guy's name, but he was one of his camp guys. I don't know if it was his head trainer or sparring partner, but I saw a guy coming around, looked like the back off an angle of Chuck that Chuck didn't see coming. And I just wanted to make sure that he didn't. And I'm being from Hawaii, first thing you do in a fight is kick off your slippers.
It was kind of legendary amongst the hardcore fan base. Would you mind walking us through Chuck versus Wanderlei, and then we'll wrap up and say goodbye.
I think that fight bothered me because Wanderlei was so damn tough, and I thought Chuck was going to be able to stop him. And just all things without nothing about. I love Wanderlei Silva. I think he's a fucking legend. But the steroid thing now, was off now, so he wasn't the big killer Wanderlei of Pride, the football or soccer kicking, guy. But he was still a fucking killer of an opponent.
Oh yeah.
But I thought I wanted Chuck to stop him, and he didn't. And it was just a tough fight. It just showed. It showed Chuck got nailed in that fight, and so did Wanderlei. And just showed two guys that were just so fucking tough, and they're so similar in so many ways. And I love them both. Obviously, I love Chuck like a family, but Wanderlei just showed so much, and so did Chuck, because Chuck got clipped a few times in that fight, and he came back. He also showed his grappling came back, came out for one of the very few times in his career. He did the ice blitz, which we've been working on for a long time. Actually, Glover helped with that technique, but that helped. But I just thought it was a great fight, and it was probably the last. What was it? I think it was like the last great fight that Chuck had, really.
My opinion, it was. Yeah.
Because he started going downhill from there, right?
Yes.
Unfortunately.
Yeah.
That was it. That was that fight.
So when you guys coached the Ultimate Fighter season 11, Jake Shields was the jiu-jitsu coach. At that point, he was kind of, I'm not going to say blackballed. That's not the right word, but he wasn't desired by the UFC. Was there any pushback to using him as a coach?
No, not at all.
Okay.
Just like, Dana didn't really like me, and he didn't push me back from being the coach either. I think, and I don't think the UFC isn't in charge of. I think they're overseeing everything, obviously, but it's its own company. I didn't know that, but it's it's a bunch of producers, and it's a whole company that does those Ultimate Fighters. And I thought they were, unless maybe he noticed some I didn't, but from my vantage point, he was just one of the coaches like I was.
So, ladies and gentlemen, this guy during the Chuck Liddell era had 6 fighters, 3 of which were in the UFC, had a 95% win rate. John, like your contributions and like your not willingness to be this head coach and trainer, you're a Hall of Fame trainer. You really are based on the totality of your work. It's incredible what you've done, man. It really is.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much. I love it. And I want to let you guys know out there, for any of you guys, I love you guys. You MMA guys are the ultimate in martial artists. And for any of you guys that have fought, given your fucking blood, sweat, and tears and not made it, financially as much as you want to, and you're trying to raise a family, and you've put your all on the line most of your life. You've been training and you didn't make it as far as you wanted to. So you don't have the means to just retire like some of the guys like Chuck, you contact me and I want to help you, to be able to obtain, a belt in Hawaiian Kempo, so you can teach, you can open a school. I also have some business consultants, really high business consultants, like the kind of guys that are making, like 6 figures a month, running a school, and they're my consultants. And I want to help you as a martial artist, and you're not able to fight in the UFC or MMA anymore. If you want to run a school and teach martial arts, I offer you to give back to the community that's given me so much. I'm going to help you without a dime. I'm not going to ever charge a dime for that, but I will help you get your black belt in Hawaiian Kempo and help you to open a school so you can do what you love now, not as a sport, but now you can teach other people how to become a better martial artist, how to be a better kid that doesn't get bullied at school, how to be a man that's a fucking alpha so he doesn't get the shit kicked out of him in front of his wife because he's too much of a bitch to fight back. I want to teach you how to protect yourself. I lost track. What were we talking about? Anyway,
you nailed it. You nailed it. Don't be a pussy. You want to not be a pussy? Contact this guy.
If you want to contact me, so you can be an instructor and you can live part of your life as a fighter, and then you can be an instructor. Maybe you want to be a fight trainer. Maybe you just want to teach kids how to be more confident and not get bullied. But I want to help you be a martial arts instructor. Reach out to me. Find me on Instagram, Pit_master.
So, John, special thank you to Hong Kong Fooey from the Underground Forum. It was a little odd contacting you going, hey, a guy named Hong Kong Fooey gave me your number. He hooked up this interview with us. He's one of the moderators over there, did a fantastic job, and I sincerely appreciate your time, man. Thank you so much.
And thanks for having me, and thanks for all you do, brother. Thank you.
Be good, man. Take care.
Check out the full interview on iTunes, Spotify, and all major podcast platforms.